Ready Player Will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Midweek through the limited Guild War. I had made a video yesterday and took me a little while to figure out my error in doing so. So I'm going to point out a major flaw in my team that I was able to correct today that hopefully I can give some extra fun insight, context, map analysis on. The team I ran yesterday, and I'll talk through this. My first video I did on this was centered around using the Melnia vision card. And that was my approach. I said, okay, how can I make a team here? And right down the middle, Squall, King Bradley, Claudia seemed like a slam dunk team. I had some fun results with them. I wanted to switch things up today, and I took a different angle. Instead of looking at a vision card, I wanted to look at a unit and just kind of build around that. And it was twofold. It was number one, Helena the Black Rose, obviously new unit, would be kind of cool to show her off. But I also, you know me, enjoy these small opportunities where I can use Grifford, where the top end of the game, Ice is in a very difficult spot at the morning. But the team I ran yesterday, Thunder Mage had pointed this out to me that I was using two of the same unit resistance vision cards here. I'd mistakenly forgotten that they were both unit resistance here. So a little silly to talk about the team when it wasn't perfect and not really how I wanted to display it. And so I remade this team today, and so yes, it is a Grifford, Soul, and Black Rose Helena team, with the idea being that just go for some of the unit res, the AoE res. I went for some lower cost Espers so that I could fit in the 15% agility card as well. Obviously, with two 100 cost units in this team, you got to skimp a little, you know, in some spots, and the Espers seem like one of them. No real rhyme or reason here. I ended up going with the Sahuagin Prince for Grifford just to get some extra agility. I really wanted this team to be slightly faster than some of the others. I went with Cactar as like the lowest rarity magic esper you can go for, and Winter Moogle on Helena, which has 20% silence res on there, just in case I happen to come across a Dark Leela team or something. It's not perfect in order to prevent it, but at least that with a rune makes it at least that there's a chance you might not get silenced. But bottom line, the general concept of this team was, let's see what I can do with some of these, you know, stellar magic units, throw Griffith into the mix, and you really show off the way I want him to be played to those of you watching. And so real quickly, I also wanted to talk about the bow tie usage here on Soul, something that's very, very intentional. And I'm going to talk about the team and what my plan is here for how I want them to attack. I did a higher level map analysis the first time. I won't do that same map analysis, but I will talk about my team in the context of the map. And so it is Griffith up top, Soul in the middle, and Helena at the bottom here. And essentially the way the turn order is supposed to go is Griffith being relatively fast will be the first to move. He'll end up going those 3 squares using his first turn buff. Helena goes next, where she moves to Soul and uses her teammate buff. Soul then uses his own teammate buff and moves straight ahead. Now he only moves 2 squares. I'm going to circle back around to this in a second. Next turn order goes Griffith using the Raft TMR, so another 3 squares. He starts using haste. Helena moves forward here. These 3 squares, she uses her own courage, or she uses her re-raise and courage removal, and then Soul moves another 2 squares, and at that point he's able to use his Pyral Calling giant AoE buff, and that's really the basics of the rotation. For Griffith, I have his main sub-jump on, which has a shift type ability where he'll dart into a bunch of enemies. He will increase their AP consumption rate, and then typically follow up with that midway through the fight with his hate generating ability. And if you recall, Soul with the bow tie means that hate is directed at Soul until that happens, or at least until it takes a couple hits. So the idea of this team is to shuffle hate around and do so in a way where Griffith typically ends up around here, my mages end up around here, and you can kind of use a little pincer attack, and we'll see how well that actually ends up working. In terms of the bow tie usage, I did want to talk about the range here and the motivations behind doing so. And the idea is really, you know, let's assume Soul can move forward 3 squares. Let's assume he's faster, right? Well, then it's the other person's turn. They move 3 squares forward. And on Soul's next turn, when he moves 3 squares again, he ends up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares away from this unit, which is his maximum range, which means he will not get off that giant buff. He will opt to attack, and I do not want that to ever happen. This scenario that we're playing out is common enough that in order to get around that, I make sure that Soul only moves 2 squares. Then you figure this character can then move the normal 3. Soul will move 2 squares again, and at that point, he is definitely outside of range of 5, where even if it's a person at a move of 1, you're talking a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares. Soul is not going to get baited and attack early. So that's really the concept behind the bow tie. I wanted to point that out because it's such a valuable item for exactly these kinds of reasons. So now for these replays, let's talk about the targets that I picked. I did end up looking at teams that obviously did have maybe a wind unit. These two that I fought did have Edward Elric in it, but I really wanted to go for teams that had either Alaya or an enemy soul. And there weren't as many souls in the guild that we were facing today, but there were a couple Alayas. And so I went with that angle that, this team is very anti-strike oriented. So even against Ed Elric, regardless of Griffith's ice element, I'm relatively confident that they can last long enough to do the damage they want. And so this first team is a Bridal, Alaya, Ed Elric, and Slime, which I thought would be kind of interesting concept to play against. And so we'll see how things end up working out here. And so we're going to see the team fight unfurl. You have Bridal, Alaya going for that teammate buff for the area resistance. It looks like Ed and Edward going next, and Ed is technically slot 1 for them, so the hate is on Ed until something happens. You see this buff rotation exactly how I described it, with now Helena going to Soul. Soul uses his own teammate buff, moves forward only 2 squares. Soul's going to use this agility, and then here comes Alaya with Protect and Shell, increases her lightning ability. Here comes Ed with AP Restore, and now we're getting the haste. I'm hoping for some lapping in the turn order now, and now Soul gets this really awesome AoE buff off that's going to help the unit res, which is great against Ed and Alaya, which is exactly why I did this. So here comes that unit res up for the team. Griffith's able to use that Mortal Joy. Now, it's not exactly the ability I want him to. I normally want him using that shifting ability, but not the end of the world here. He's still taking a couple good hits, gets that lightning in peril now. Soul is still out of range. I'm actually very much okay with that they are taking their sweet time. Here comes Helena using that courage move on Bridal Alaya. And at this point, I got some good unit affinity things working for me. Slime does have their agility up as well, so it's a little closer than I would have liked. Bridal Alaya procs the paralysis on Helena because Bridal Alaya with her Protect and Shell buff gets an increased chance to do so, but you can see here comes the hate ability from Griffith, able to secure the kill, and at this point, Griffith's now gotten the hate. I'm still relatively close, so it doesn't mean as much. Normally, I would have liked Griffith to be a little further away, but overall, they're taking hits like a champ from this team, and Slime at this point is really just a battle of attrition where he's going to heal himself up. He's going to be brought down to 1, basically, and keep that courage, and now we're going to rinse and repeat. But this battle was won relatively handily because I wasn't really gearing for that unit res, a little bit of that strike res, and then just hoping to kind of like outbrawl the enemy with some of the healing that both Soul and Helena do. So overall, very happy with how that battle ended up working out. And now for the second battle here, I wanted to try something slightly different where I went for a team that had Bridal Alaya. It's another Ed Elric, but it's a Raph as the tank here instead of the Slime. And so I wanted to put this team against more of a dedicated tank, see how that ends up working out. And I'm still relatively confident. A lot of the things still hold true. It's very unit-oriented in their attack types for the most part. Alaya here using that same buff, but not able to move to a teammate because the height difference there. Griffith's going to use his first turn buff. Here comes Helena with her teammate buff. Soul's going to use the same thing here. And then Rap's going to end up moving forward. And this is a perfect example of why I wanted Soul using the bow tie, because in a team like this, Raph is now technically in range that had Soul had a move of 3, he would have moved forward to attack Raph on this next turn rather than using his buff. I do not want that. Task completed successfully. So here comes Ed with the giant Dispel. Dispel is actually very good against his team. There's a lot of things to dispel, so Ed is really valuable in doing so. Here comes that Remove Courage and the stop of re-raise. Raph gets that second buff off, and here's that giant AoE buff. And at this point, unfortunately, he doesn't use that shifting ability, but at least takes the hate. So I'm okay with that. That Griffith takes the hate early here to direct some of their attacks. It's still going to not matter for Ed, who has a lot of that, AoE in Select 3 or Select 2, but Soul doing a ton of damage, able to keep the sustainability up for Griffith there. An immense amount of damage from Helena there. And I'm not going to lie, that's a pretty scary limit break from Alaya too. Did a lot of damage. Raph able to take out Soul's also a very big thing here. This fight, great counter ability there, is definitely not as clean as it would have liked it to have been, but at least able to kill Raph. Raph's going to re-raise though, and it's going to get very close here. I was very scared. Now at least got the CT down on Raph that hopefully I can edge another turn in here somewhere. She takes out Helena, who still has re-raise, but Griffith's health is so low. 1 HP, and I actually don't know how. I think that's actual luck, where he didn't have any courage, right? Actually, let me go back here. I literally think that's just pure luck that she happened to not do enough damage. I actually can't believe that Griffith ended up being at 1 HP, and I'll pause just so you can see it. That is not a unit with courage. I think that's straight RNG, that she did barely enough damage. Now, I don't necessarily know if it would have mattered because he doesn't attack here anyway. Helen was able to come in here and finish the fight. But man, I was sweating there at the end there to see if I could actually clear that team. The long story short, I didn't truly execute the concept that I wanted to with Griffith here, the way these teams ended up working out. I can show one of the replays from yesterday just to highlight some of that movement, and I'll skip ahead here just a little bit to kind of demonstrate. I did fight a mono win team yesterday. It was just easy pickings. I figured have some fun with it. But you'll see halfway through this fight now, Griffith ends up using his shift ability, and it'll make a lot more sense once you see it. It's unfortunate it didn't work this time, but Griffith's going to move forward on a team like this. And typically, I think the reason that it didn't work this last time is because there was a lot of single target units out in front. For how they're grouped up here, if you look at Griffith's ability, that move target to panel, it's a much larger AoE, and so I think when picking, maximizing the damage, he ended up going for the unit scaling attacks, but for them being grouped up here, he ends up shifting into this team instead. And you can see now, from a positioning perspective, I like that he's kind of near the front. He can draw attacks there, and when he does follow up with his hate-generating ability, you've already created more of a natural pincer. So the bottom line is this is a fun team to run. Obviously a little bit OP using both Sol and Helena, who can really dominate fights as you saw, but it's not a guaranteed thing. You saw how close that second battle was, but regardless, this is a fun one to do today. Hopefully you learned something, and that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all later.